Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really serious topic, actually. It's about major trauma from motorized recreation vehicles. We're zoning in on Canada, where motorcycles and off-road vehicles, ATVs, UTVs, side-by-side, snowmobiles, that sort of thing, they're super
Right.
popular for work, for fun. But here's our mission today. We're digging into a big study from Nova Scotia, covered 16 years, 2002 to 2017. And it specifically looked at people who suffered major traumatic brain injuries, TBIs, from crashes involving these vehicles. And TBI, well, it's the main reason people die in these kinds of accidents.
Yeah.
So we're going to pull apart this data, really focusing on how alcohol intoxication and helmet use play into these fatal outcomes.
It's definitely a critical area. And just to give some national context, Canada sees a lot of these deaths every year. We're talking roughly 180 motorcycle fatalities, about 100 for ATVs, and around 73 for snowmobiles. These aren't, low-risk activities to begin with.
No, definitely not.
And the study reinforces what we kind of already know increases risk. Things like high speeds, driving at night, carrying extra passengers, and definitely alcohol and drug use.
Yeah.
But what's really striking nationally is how often substances are involved. Reports show alcohol or drugs in about half of ATV and snowmobile deaths.
Half. Wow.
Yeah. And nearly a third of motorcycle fatalities, too. So this isn't some, rare thing. Impairment is a huge part of the picture for these activities across the country.
Okay, right. Let's really unpack that then, focusing on this specific Nova Scotia group. The study had, 424 TBI patients?
That's right, 424 total. It was split pretty evenly, 220 from ORV crashes and 204 from motorcycle crashes.
So that gives us a great way to compare these two types of vehicles used so differently. Which brings us, I guess, to our first big point, the tale of two vehicles, ORV versus motorcycle.
Exactly. And when you start comparing these groups, the differences, they really jump out at you. It sets the scene for why the outcomes might differ so much. First off, age. The ORV crash patients were quite a bit younger. Average age was 34.
Okay, 34.
Whereas the motorcycle crash patients, they were older, averaging 44 years old. Almost a decade difference.
So ORVs are attracting a younger crowd, generally speaking. That makes sense.
It does seem that way in this cohort. But here's probably the most startling difference, the one that really shapes the whole conversation. Helmets.
Helmet use.
Right. With the motorcycle riders, compliance was actually pretty high. Almost 89% of the patients in the study were wearing one.
89%. Okay, that's pretty good.
Very good, relatively speaking. Now, look at the ORV users. Less than half. Only 45% were wearing a helmet when they crashed.
Wow, less than half. 45%. That's a huge gap. Why? I mean, is it just about the law, or is there something cultural going on there?
It's likely a mix of things, environment, law, culture. Motorcycles, they're mostly used on roads. Helmet laws tend to be stricter, more visible, maybe better enforced. There's kind of an established safety expectation.
Right, you see everyone else wearing one?
Exactly. But ORVs, they're often used off-road, maybe in more rural spots, isolated trails. People might feel like the risk of getting caught or even crashing is lower.
That perception of I'm just on my own property or out in the woods.
Precisely. Which can lead to, taking more chances with safety gear like helmets.
Okay, that context is really helpful. Now let's layer in the alcohol factor. The study measured blood alcohol concentration, BAC, and they grouped it into 3 levels.
Yeah, 3 levels for the analysis. BAC negative, which was essentially no alcohol present, then legal intoxication, and finally criminal intoxication.
And just to clarify for everyone, the criminal intoxication level, that's significantly higher than the standard legal driving limit most people know, right?
Oh, absolutely. It represents a very high level of impairment. And when you look at these levels by vehicle type, the ORV group stands out dramatically. For the ORV crashes where they tested BAC, 65%, nearly 2/3, were found to be criminally intoxicated.
65%. Criminally intoxicated, that number is. It's shocking. Is that typical just for Nova Scotia, or is this a wider ORV issue?
It certainly points to a major issue, and while this study is specific to Nova Scotia, it echoes concerns seen elsewhere. If you look at the bigger picture in this study, almost 3/4 of the ORV TBI patients who got tested had some alcohol in their system.
3/4 positive for any alcohol. Good grief.
Yeah. So you've got this combination, younger drivers, incredibly high rates of significant intoxication, and as we said, really low helmet use. It's a dangerous mix.
And for motorcyclists, just to compare.
Much lower on the intoxication front. Only 18% of the tested motorcycle patients reached that criminal intoxication level.
Okay, so 18 versus 65%. It really is Like two different worlds in terms of behavior.
It really is.
Let's dig into that connection more directly then. The link between drinking and skipping the helmet, that's our section 2. How does alcohol affect helmet non-use? Did the study show that being drunk makes you less likely to wear one, independently of other factors?
Yes, it did. And the link is incredibly clear. When they looked at helmet use based on BAC levels, the patients who were BAC negative had the best compliance. About 80% wore a helmet.
Okay, 80% for the sober group.
Right. But as the alcohol level went up, helmet use went down sharply. For those drivers at the criminal intoxication level, helmet use dropped to just 50%.
Only half of the most intoxicated group wore helmets.
Exactly. And the really crucial part is when they adjusted for other things like age, sex, type of vehicle. Even after controlling for those, they found that people operating with a criminal BAC were 3.7 times more likely to be unhelmeted compared to the sober patients.
3.7 times the odds. So it's not just that drunk people crash more, it's that being drunk itself seems to lead directly to the bad decision of not wearing protection.
That's what the statistics strongly suggest, yes. It points to alcohol intoxication as an independent risk factor for that specific dangerous behavior, skipping the helmet.
Did that hold up even when they looked just at the fatal crashes, the worst outcomes?
Absolutely. The association remains strong. Even when analyzing only the fatal crashes, being criminally intoxicated was associated with nearly 4 times the odds of not wearing a helmet.
4 times, even in fatal crashes.
Okay.
That's powerful. It really highlights how tackling alcohol use could potentially improve helmet use too.
It certainly suggests a strong connection there, yeah.
Hmm.
Interventions targeting alcohol might have that beneficial side effect on safety gear use.
Okay, so we've established alcohol makes you less likely to wear a helmet. But the ultimate question is survival. How does alcohol directly impact the chances of dying from one of these crashes? Let's move into section 3. Alcohol and mortality risk.
Right, so the researchers looked at mortality at 2 key points in time. First, pre-hospital death, so dying at the scene or without the hospital.
Okay,
And second, in-hospital mortality, dying after reaching the emergency department.
got it. And what did they find for pre-hospital death?
Criminal intoxication was a significant predictor of dying before getting to the hospital. Those patients, the ones with the highest BAC levels, were 3 times more likely to die pre-hospital compared to patients who were BAC negative.
3 times more likely to die at the scene or en route. So, high alcohol levels really stack the odds against you from the very beginning. What about if you do make it to the hospital?
This is where the findings are perhaps even more sobering, if you'll pardon the pun.
Okay.
For in-hospital mortality, any level of intoxication dramatically increased the odds of death. It wasn't just the criminally intoxicated group.
Any level, even the lower legal intoxication level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Patients who were legally intoxicated, so above the negative threshold but below the criminal one, had over 5 times the odds of dying in the hospital compared to the BAC negative patients.
5 times the odds.
And those with criminal intoxication. They had a similarly massive increase in risk, also around 5 times the odds of in-hospital death compared to the sober group.
Wow. Over 5 times the chance of dying after getting medical attention, just because there was alcohol involved, even at lower levels. That's a brutal statistic. It suggests alcohol does something fundamental to your ability to survive severe trauma.
It really does. It points towards alcohol having detrimental physiological effects during trauma resuscitation and recovery, separate from just causing the crash or influencing helmet use.
Which leads it to something a bit confusing in this study, something we need to clarify. Let's call it the severity paradox. This is section 4. Based on everything we've just said, more drinking, less helmet use, you'd logically expect the intoxicated group, especially the criminally intoxicated ones, to have the absolute worst injuries, right? The highest severity scores.
That's the logical assumption, yes. Helmets protect the head, reduce TBI severity, so fewer helmets plus high intoxication should equal higher injury severity scores, or ISS. That's the standard measure of how badly injured someone is overall. Higher ISS means worse injuries.
Right, but the study found the opposite.
Kind of, yeah. It was counterintuitive. The group that was BAC negative, the sober ones, actually had the highest average injury severity score, around 35.5.
Okay, highest severity for the sober group.
Meanwhile, the criminally intoxicated group, despite lower helmet use, had the lowest average ISS, around 29.6.
Lower injury severity for the most drunk, often unhelmeted group. How?
Yeah.
How is that possible? What does that even mean? Did the alcohol somehow protect them?
Well, protect is probably the wrong word, but this finding touches on something complex and debated in trauma research. It's sometimes called the alcohol paradox.
The alcohol paradox. Okay, tell us more about that.
The study acknowledges this was unexpected, but there is some existing, though conflicting, evidence suggesting that in certain specific trauma situations, alcohol might paradoxically be associated with slightly better initial outcomes on some measures, or maybe different injury patterns. It's not fully understood. Theories include things like alcohol, possibly acting as a temporary muscle relaxant, maybe altering how someone falls or takes an impact, or perhaps it decreases the initial perception of pain or the body's immediate stress response in a way that influences the calculated ISS score.
So the lower ISS score for the intoxicated group might be a kind of artifact of the alcohol's physiological effects, rather than meaning they were actually less injured in a meaningful way?
That's a very plausible interpretation, and it's crucial not to misunderstand this point. It sounds like the ISS score alone might not be telling the whole story here when high levels of alcohol are involved.
Right, because it sounds completely contradictory to the mortality findings.
Exactly, and that is the absolute critical takeaway here. Despite this odd finding about the ISS scores, which could be influenced by alcohol's immediate effects, or maybe even lead to quicker pre-hospital deaths that remove the most severely injured from the in-hospital analysis, the study's main conclusion on mortality is crystal clear. Alcohol intoxication, regardless of that ISS number, independently predicts a significantly higher risk of death.
Okay, so don't get hung up on the ISS score confusion. The bottom line remains. Drinking massively increases your chances of dying.
Precisely. The risk of death is higher both before reaching the hospital and after arriving if you've been drinking. Full stop.
That really brings us full circle to the main conclusion of this deep dive then. This huge data set from Nova Scotia confirms it. Alcohol is a major independent risk factor. It's linked to not wearing a helmet, and it's linked to a much higher risk of dying, both at the scene and in the hospital.
Absolutely. And from a clinical perspective, what this really drives home is the need for consistent alcohol screening in emergency departments for anyone involved in these crashes.
It shouldn't just be a check-the-box thing for legal reasons.
No, exactly. Knowing about the alcohol involvement should really trigger conversations about injury prevention. And perhaps most importantly, it's an opportunity, maybe the only one, to refer patients to resources for substance use issues, to try and break that cycle of risky behavior.
It also shines a light on a potential gap between law and reality, doesn't it? Especially for ORVs. Nova Scotia has rules, safety training, helmets required for those 16 and up.
Yes, the regulations exist on paper.
But this data clearly shows widespread non-compliance with helmets and just rampant levels of intoxication, particularly in that ORV group, often in more rural settings where enforcement might be tougher.
It highlights the challenge. Clearly, just having the law isn't enough. We need more research to understand why. What are the specific social factors, the cultural norms, the reasons behind the alcohol misuse and helmet non-use in the specific population?
So we can actually develop education and prevention strategies that might work.
Exactly. We need targeted efforts that address the root causes, not just repeat general safety messages.
Well, thank you for walking us through this pretty sobering data set. It's complex, but incredibly important work. We hope this deep dive gives you, our listeners, a clearer picture of the very real risks.
And the key message really is, whether you're on a motorcycle or an ORV, adding alcohol dramatically increases your risk of not surviving a crash. The data is stark.
That is definitely the thought we want to leave you with today. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.